Seismic instruments across the globe registered a peculiar tremor. It was not the familiar signature of an earthquake, nor was it volcanic in the conventional sense. Observatories from Hawaii to Japan reported a disturbance. Yet initial reports were met with skepticism. The idea of new land masses appearing from the deep was the stuff of fiction, not sober scientific record. The ocean floor was mapped, or so it was believed. This event defied all known geological precedent, a true anomaly. Naval vessels diverted to the coordinates relayed astonishing news. An island, or rather a small archipelago, had indeed risen. It was there. Solid. Real. Aerial reconnaissance followed swiftly. Photographs depicted jagged, unfamiliar peaks, dark, unwelcoming shores. The landmass appeared fully formed, as if thrust upwards by a colossal unseen hand. Geologists were baffled. There were no preceding signs, no gradual uplift. Amongst those captivated by Ethelberg's mystery was Professor Alistair Armitage. He was a man of considerable years, a geographer and explorer of the old school. His life had been dedicated to charting the Earth's remotest corners. He had seen wonders, faced perils. Ethelberg, he declared, was to be his final, crowning expedition. The lure of such an unprecedented phenomenon was irresistible to his adventurous spirit. He felt the pull of the unknown, a call he had answered countless times before. This, however, felt different, more profound, more urgent. Alongside Armitage was Dr. Eleanor Vance. She was a younger scientist, a xenophysicist whose theories often skirted the fringes of conventional science. Where Armitage saw a geological puzzle, Vance perceived something more. She suspected forces beyond the terrestrial, perhaps an artifact, perhaps a gateway. Her instruments were designed to detect anomalies that standard equipment would miss. She sought answers not in textbooks, but in the direct confrontation of the inexplicable. Ethelberg was to her a laboratory unlike any other, a chance to test her boldest hypotheses. The man tasked with conveying them to this enigma and ensuring their hopeful return was Captain Rexford. The voyage to Ethelberg was marked by a growing sense of unease. As the seeker drew closer, the very atmosphere seemed to change. The vibrant blue of the Pacific gave way to a grayer, more somber hue around the emerging landmass. The island itself loomed larger each day, a dark silhouette against the horizon. It seemed to draw the light towards itself, swallowing it. Even the seasoned sailors among the crew felt a prickle of disquiet. There was no precedent for this, no charts to guide them into such a strange new world. Their first clear sight of Ethelberg's shoreline was deeply unsettling. Instead of sandy beaches or familiar rock, they saw shores of what looked like polished obsidian. The material gleamed faintly, reflecting the overcast sky with a dead light. Strange twisted vegetation grew sparsely near the water's edge. It possessed a metallic sheen, its forms angular and unnatural. Most disturbing was the silence. No cries of seabirds greeted them, no sound of surf upon the shore. Only an oppressive, profound hush lay over the island. As the landing party ventured further inland, the landscape grew increasingly bizarre. The terrain was a chaotic jumble of sharp rocks and unnaturally smooth surfaces. They encountered geometric rock formations, perfect cubes, spheres and pyramids, far too precise to be the work of natural erosion. These structures seemed to have been placed, or perhaps to have grown, with an alien intention. The pervasive metallic scent intensified, mingling with an odor like ozone. The very ground seemed to hum with a suppressed energy, making their teeth ache slightly. Their exploration led them to a clearing. In its center stood a colossal monolith. It was a single seamless shaft of a dark, unidentifiable material, soaring at least 100 feet into the grey sky. Its surface was perfectly smooth, without mark or inscription. It radiated a distinct coldness, a chill that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature. It offered no clue as to its origin or purpose. It simply stood, a silent, imposing sentinel in the heart of the island's mystery. Professor Armitage stared, his aged face a mask of awe and profound bewilderment. As dusk began to settle, casting long, distorted shadows, strange lights appeared in the distance. They were not campfires, nor any recognizable natural phenomena. The first sign of something amiss came from young Thomas, one of the crewmen. He was a robust man, barely into his 20s. He began to complain of sudden sharp aches in his joints. Dr. Vance noticed his hair seemed thinner at the temples. A subtle graying was also apparent. These were changes one might expect over years, not hours. Thomas seemed oblivious to these changes, focusing only on his discomfort. Dr. Vance, too, experienced a disquieting moment. Catching her reflection, she saw fine lines around her eyes. She touched her face, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. The island's oppressive atmosphere seemed to press down, heavy with unspoken threat. Professor Armitage felt a profound and sudden weariness descend upon him. His movements became slow, labored. Panic, raw and unreasoning, finally erupted. Dr. Vance, glancing at her own hands, saw the skin loosen, age spots appearing like faint bruises. She ran a trembling hand through her hair. Thick strands of grey came away. The reflection she had dismissed earlier was now a horrifying reality. Decades were being compressed into moments. She tried to scream, to voice the terror that clawed at her throat, but only a dry, hoarse whisper emerged. Her vocal cords, like the rest of her body, were succumbing to an unnatural, accelerated senescence. The island was stealing their youth. Professor Armitage was now an ancient figure. He had collapsed onto the strange metallic soil, his body frail and shrunken. His eyes, clouded with the rheum of extreme old age, held a terrible, lucid understanding. He could no longer stand, no longer speak. With a trembling, withered hand, he gestured feebly towards the distant shore, towards the seeker. His meaning was terrifyingly clear. Escape. Flee this accursed place. But even this small movement seemed to exhaust his remaining vitality. Dr. Vance, though her body was now that of an extremely old woman, retained a spark of her formidable intellect. Through the fog of physical decay and terror, a horrifying understanding dawned. This was a temporal field, a distortion of time itself. They had to leave. They had to escape its influence. With immense effort, she raised a trembling, withered arm and pointed insistently towards the shore. Her eyes, ancient but still burning with desperate urgency, implored her companions to move, to flee this place that devoured life. The journey back to the landing boat was an agonizing ordeal. Each step was a monumental effort for their frail, aged bodies. Joints, stiffened and painful as if by a century of use, screamed in protest. The distance, which had seemed trivial upon their arrival, now stretched before them like an impassable desert. They stumbled, they fell, they helped each other with an unspoken, desperate solidarity. Young Thomas, now looking like a centenarian, crawled for part of the way, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The metallic flora seemed to mock their slow, torturous progress. Somehow they reached the seeker. Captain Rexford, who had remained aboard monitoring their progress with growing anxiety, saw them approach. His face, initially etched with relief, contorted into a mask of utter disbelief and horror. Days later, the seeker was sighted. It was adrift, far from its expected course, its engines silent. A naval patrol vessel, dispatched after communications had ceased, approached with caution. They hailed the research ship repeatedly. There was no response. Only an eerie, profound silence emanated from the seeker as it wallowed in the Pacific swell. The patrol commander felt a chill despite the tropical sun. Something was terribly wrong. He ordered a boarding party to investigate, their weapons ready, their minds braced for the unknown. The scene that greeted the boarding party was one of profound, inexplicable shock. Captain Rexford was found on the bridge, slumped over the controls. He too had aged, though not as catastrophically as those who had set foot on the island. His hair was white, his face deeply lined. He could only point, his voice a hoarse, barely audible rasp, towards the ship's sickbay. His eyes conveyed a depth of horror that words could not have matched. The naval officers, hardened men, felt a wave of cold dread wash over them. In the sickbay, the truth of Athelberg's horror was laid bare. Professor Armitage, Dr. Vance, Thomas and Barlow were unrecognizable. The 4 explorers who had dared to tread upon Ethelberg were brought home. Their return was not to accolades, but to hushed rooms and grieving faces. They lived out their remaining days in silent torment. They were living testaments to the island's incomprehensible power. Their families mourned the vibrant, curious people they had lost. Ethelberg was immediately and indefinitely quarantined. A wide exclusion zone was established. No ship or aircraft was permitted to approach. It sat in the Pacific, a dark blemish on the charts. What forces resided within its strange metallic landscape? Was it a natural phenomenon or something deliberately constructed? The island offered no answers, only a silent, brooding presence. Science found itself powerless before the enigma of Athelberg. Theories abounded, of course. Some spoke of a localized temporal distortion field, others whispered of alien technology or a dimensional rift. But without further investigation, these remained mere speculations. The island guarded its secrets with absolute finality. Humanity was left with a chilling realization. For all our knowledge, there were still mysteries far beyond our comprehension. Ethelberg remained, a scar on the world map, a silent monument to the unknown.